Hello, all my AP World students. One thing before I get started, just to let you know, I'm recording this from home and there's some construction going on outside. I tried to close the window, but hopefully it won't get too loud. But if there are background noises, that's what's going on. So this is to outline the historical thinking skills that the College Board has outlined for AP World History. Now, if you've taken another AP History, in AP Euro, it was before the redesign, so we didn't really talk much historical thinking skills. When we did, we didn't really have these key categories for them. And if it turns out that we have someone else in our class come fall that has taken another AP History class, they may have used some of these skills, but they're slightly different for each history course. For example, the AP US course actually has more historical thinking skills than AP Euro does. So they're not completely interchangeable, but there's a lot of overlap. So that's just a brief introduction. So first off, essentially, when we go into AP World, what we're really experiencing, even though AP World had a redesign a few years ago, we're experiencing a redesign ourselves, essentially, since AP Euro last year did not have all these key categories. So really, the purpose of this slide is to ask the question, well, why is the AP doing this for all their history courses? Why are they redesigning all these exams? And a lot of it is because what you probably remember from AP Euro, and probably what you did not like, is that you had to do a lot of memorization. For example, for the multiple choice questions, a lot of times with the questions you either knew the answer because you had studied exactly what happened, like the causal war, for example, or you didn't know it and you had to use the process of elimination. And what the College Board is realizing more and more is that that's not really what makes you a good student of history, or in the future, an historian, right? I mean, I can't memorize, and I've been teaching and studying history for the better part of my life. It's not that I can't memorize, but oftentimes I still have to look things up, and in a way that sort of made me feel inferior sometimes. I thought, oh, I should have known this. But what I always have been able to do is use these historical thinking skills, and that's what this presentation, that's what this PowerPoint video is all about. So ultimately, in order to really master a history class, not just an AP one, but a college history class or grad class, or just to be a thoughtful historian, you need to actually be able to understand and synthesize or put everything together. Otherwise, you're just a memorizer, and that really does not necessarily indicate your ability to be a strong student in history. So, these are the skills. There are 4 of them for AP World. So, crafting historical arguments from historical evidence, chronological reasoning, comparison and contextualization, and historical interpretation and synthesis. So let's go into all of them in more detail. And just to warn you, most of the time when I do PowerPoints and videos, I try to spice them up with pictures and such. This doesn't have those. I really can't be cutesy enough to think of skills, or pictures that represent these skills. So this is all text. It's one of my more boring videos, but at least you can see my face here in case you missed me. So the first skill, crafting historical arguments from historical evidence. Okay, so essentially, these 2 things are divided into sub-skills from here. So historical argumentation, even though we've never called it this, we've had experience with historical argumentation. In my mind, to really break it down and simplify it, this is what writing a thesis statement is. Okay? Essentially, you need to be able to prove to the readers in the College Board that you can actually come up with a conclusion, or you can come up with an interpretation, an argument about why something happened, the reasons for something. Essentially, you're taking the cues from the question and you're proving to the AP readers that you can make a sophisticated historical argument about something. So more or less what that means is you can write a thesis that has an argument and that defends that argument throughout your essay. That's what historical argumentation is. Building upon that, the second sub-skill, appropriate use of relevant historical evidence. What this means is that you need to be able to take a variety of types of historical evidence. So for example, primary sources and secondary sources. You need to be able to take both of those and ultimately use them to help you come up with a conclusion, you come up with your historical argument. Also, types of historical evidence. Okay, so not just primary sources, but is it visual? Is it a letter? Is it an archaeological artifact? All of these different things are types of historical evidence, and they're all useful in different ways. And we'll spend lots of time this year talking about them. Point of view also is very relevant here. So we've done point of view with AP Euro last year, but ultimately the idea is think about the author's perspective or the creator's perspective of that source, right? So if it's a letter, think about who was writing the letter, why that matters, how old they are, what their gender is, what their race, ethnicity, what their socioeconomic status is. We've done point of view, so you should be pretty comfortable with this. But again, point of view is another really key skill here for you to ultimately be able to come up with an historical argument. And also evaluate the argument. With a primary source, you don't necessarily, or even a secondary source for that matter, you don't need to agree with the author, right? And so, is this person's perspective accurate? Could their perspective actually be skewed? Like, for example, if it's someone who just lost a war and is feeling sort of bitter about that loss, could this shape the bias that exists in whatever the source is? Okay, the next is chronological reasoning. Okay, so again, there are a couple sub-skills that go into this. So the first is historical causation. So in other words, you need to be comfortable with discussing the different reasons why something happened. And to make it really simple, most historians break the causes of a particular event into two categories, long and short term. So, for example, going to AP Euro again, if we're thinking about the causes of World War I, I'm sure you remember a short-term cause, the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, right? And then long-term causes would be things like imperialism and militarization and the entangling of alliances. That's causation, right? Patterns of continuity and change over time. All right, well, this is in a lot of ways exactly what it sounds like, but ultimately what you do with this is you need to think about whether something that happens in a particular time is indicative of a major change over history. So, for example, how the Industrial Revolution changes the way that people work and the way that people live. Or you could make the argument that not much has changed despite a large period of time elapsing. And again, this is up to your own bias or interpretation. I could say that despite industrialization, to a certain extent, not much has changed in a given part of people's lives. I'm drawing a blank, but I mean, you could ultimately say that patterns of immigration are still very much shaped by the conditions, the social, the political, the economic conditions of the country that someone's coming from. This is still driving reasons for people to leave their home countries. Despite the fact that it's 2015, we still see this happening. Think about all the ships that have capsized in the Mediterranean trying to get to Europe over the past few months. That's a great example. Periodization, the third sub-skill. Ultimately, again, this is kind of what it sounds like, but in order to acquire this skill, you need to be able to break up different events in history and place them in appropriate time periods. And actually, the College Board does this for us in a lot of ways. But we also have to kind of ask ourselves the question, well, why do we end period 1 at the year 600 BC? Why not 700 BC? Why not? So periodization is intact in the College Board. They do break up these ideas or break up these different time periods. But at the same time, to be a really skilled historian, you still need to be able to challenge that a little. Okay, the third skill is comparison and contextualization. Okay, so two sub-skills. First is comparison. Now, in a lot of ways, this goes back to your kind of middle school way of interpreting history when a teacher tells you to compare and contrast. But here, all that the College Board says is compare, but it's implied that you still contrast. So if there were an essay question on the AP exam that told you to compare Rome and Greece, it's implied that you also contrast. So I'll probably be hammering that into you a lot this year, that just because it doesn't say contrast doesn't mean that you're not supposed to do that. Then contextualization, again, in a lot of ways you can kind of compare this to periodization, sort of. It's the idea that you're making sure that you put things into a proper context. Actually, I'm thinking about English class when I'm thinking about contextualization. So, for example, if your teacher had you read A Tale of Two Cities by Dickens, what you probably do at a certain point in class is you contextualize the book. You talk about how it took place sort of during industrial Europe and how it shaped the cities of London and Paris. Okay, so thinking about why a given person, a given idea, a given event, why the fact that it occurs in that time period is relevant and significant. And when you have a continuity and change essay, and I'll talk about that in a separate video and in separate classes, being able to contextualize something is really important. So CCOT, that thing that you see down there, right? That's continuity and change over time. This is really significant for you to be able to master. Okay, last but not least, the last historical thinking skill for AP World is historical interpretation and synthesis. Again, they break it up into two sub-skills. So first is historical interpretation. Now, for me, historical interpretation is really a lot like a skill that I acquired when I was in college and grad school, and that's historiography. I don't expect you to know what historiography is, and it's complex, but essentially historiography is the history of writing about history. That sounds like a circular definition, but really what that means is that even historians can change their mind over time. Okay, so let's take an example of the John F. Kennedy assassination. Now, wouldn't you think that immediately after JFK was assassinated that people would be really sympathetic towards him despite their political leanings? So, for example, you probably know that JFK was a Democrat. Maybe Republicans even gave him the benefit of the doubt after his assassination because he was killed, and that's a terrible thing to happen, so maybe people were a little bit more forgiving. And then as time passed, people suddenly started to be a little bit more critical in their interpretation of JFK and started to bring up things like his infidelity in his marriages, right? Or whether or not he had the kind of foreign policy experience really needed to deal with things like the Cuban Missile Crisis and the U.S. involvement in Vietnam. Anyway, I think you get the idea, but it's essentially how historians can change their interpretation of a given event, or maybe even how an historian's point of view. Like, are you a Southern historian talking about the Civil War, or are you from the North? Are you not American and you're talking about American history? I know this is world history, but you can see that I tend to draw a lot of my examples from US, as you probably remember from class last year. And then the other sub-skill is synthesis, which is essentially combining all the historical thinking skills that I discussed in the previous slides and putting all of that together. And if you have synthesis, honestly, that's what makes you master an AP history. And if you have synthesis, then you likely will perform well on the AP exam. Okay, so last but not least, if you have questions about anything I just talked about, or if you want to see it again, know that you can go to my website, which again is still under development, but I'm clicking on it right now. It should take us right there. And what you're going to see if you go to the website, and again, still under construction to a large extent, but this is the home page, and if we click on the AP Prep tab, then first off, what you're going to see is that I gave you a link to the College Board's explanation of these historical thinking skills, so you can go through them, and it has slightly longer explanations of all these different terms. Another thing that you'll find on the site is that I will have this video here as well.